Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we are jumping into a big barley wine from Fairstate Brewing Cooperative out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. We've had a few of their beers before, certainly never a barley wine. This specific barley wine is called Life Ain't Fair. Clocks in at 14.8% ABV, very high ABV indeed, even for a standard barley wine. Label art on this one looks pretty cool. It's kind of a very colorful, I don't know, lonely highway running through a desert kind of scene with a silhouette of a man walking down the road with presumably his pet dog. So life may not be fair, but he's got his bud there, so life can't be too bad. But nonetheless, big old barley wine. I absolutely love them, and I'm fortunate to have kind of stockpiled quite a few, so got quite a few we're going to be ripping through in the coming weeks. So gently. All right, and we're going to be using our stout glass today. Works quite well for barley wines. All right, get the poured in gently. Oh, there it is, that classic caramelly color that we typically see with the barley wine. Not always, but do typically. This one's pretty active in terms of carbonation. I'm going to stop right there, give it a chance to do its thing. Okay, so yeah, this is a dark, true caramel color. Very much in the classic barley wine spectrum. They can run all over the board. They can be much lighter than this. They can be pitch black even. I've had a black barley wine. It was absolutely delicious. But this is very much that classic caramelly color. Very, very active in terms of carbonation on this one. It's mostly kind of bigger, medium-sized kind of effervescence coming up. So it did already start to collapse that head. Barley wines are kind of all over the board. If you get a really tight carbonation formation that's active with the super fine champagne-like bubbles, it'll often form a nice creamy head, but with these medium-sized ones, it's just really hard to do it. It's luck of the draw. But it looks really nice otherwise visually. Let's get right over for a sniff. Oh yeah. Yeah, it smells like a big one. This is not a barrel-aged beer, it's just a classic barley wine, but pushing 15%. This one does have a little of a booziness on the nose, no question about it. And it's definitely got a very big kind of fruity bouquet. I'm getting raisins, I'm getting grapes, I'm definitely getting plums. There is a big undercurrent of all this fruit kind of meddling and a little bit of a booziness to it and a definite kind of malty aroma in the mix of all these big fruit. There is this caramelly undertone to it, to be certain. So it smells pretty prototypical for a barley wine. It looks the part. It's got the right ABV range. So let's just jump in and see what this one is about. Oh, that's nice. It's got a nice combination of flavors here. What I gotta say for this one, the intensity is subtle compared to what you would perhaps anticipate for A, a barley wine in general, and B, any beer approaching on 15% ABV. The aromas are there, the flavors are there. It's really nice, it's quite complex, but this one doesn't just come straight out and whack you in the face with a wall of flavor. It comes and it's subtle and everything kind of does its thing. It doesn't have quite that level of intensity you would normally associate with this beer style or a beer in this ABV range. So let's talk texture first. In terms of the mouthfeel, you can absolutely feel the resistance on this one. Agitation on the palate does also get quite creamy with this beer. In terms of the body, it doesn't feel as heavy as a 15% ABV barley wine typically would. I would say this one is really kind of just border medium heavy. I would expect it to be really a true heavy beer. This one does not feel quite that weighty, but the mouthfeel is very much in line with what I anticipated, and that nice creaminess, that silkiness upon agitation really adds to the whole textural sensory experience. So the flavor profile here. A lot of what you get in the aroma absolutely translates into this glass. Notably, kind of the grape side and the plum side. I am definitely getting a big amount of plums and raisins coming through in this flavor profile. as well as that very caramel-like quality from the malt bill as well. So this is one of these classic barley wines where it's got these kind of rich fruit flavors mixing with these undercurrents of caramelization. This one I'm not really getting anything in it that tastes like toffee, but there is definitely some caramelization in there. So the subtlety of this beer did make it a little tricky for me to pick out everything kind of in the order of operations. I was paying attention to what was coming to me, but I was expecting a roll-on of intensity that didn't really happen. So I'm definitely going to take a second dive here, make sure that I got everything just right, I'm not missing anything. Then we're going to talk about the finish, but a very, very nice beer if dialed back for my expectations. So take two. Up front, it's a lot of caramel. Yeah, a little bit of a booziness to it. That's where these kind of plums and raisins, there's a little bit of a figgy flavor to it as well. Even a little touch of apricot. On second sip, everything did re-intensify. And it gave it a little more oomph for me to really start to pick out these flavors. It's still not in your face in terms of intensity, but after a second sip, due to its inherent thickness, it does kind of coat the palate and let these flavors linger to try to open up and develop a bit more. So much nicer for my money from this second sip forward. Yeah, there's nothing really in here that's inherently bizarre. It's very much a classic barley wine recipe. It's just not quite as intense and in your face. There's a boatload of caramel. There's this underlying maltiness, a little bit of a booziness to it. Not all barley wines have that kind of suggestion of booziness, either on the nose or in the flavor profile. This one does a little bit, but it's not off-putting. This is nearly a 15% ABV beer. I mean, it's to be expected. It lets you know you're drinking a high ABV beer. It's a barley wine. That's what it is, folks. But this one's quite nice. And yeah, just raisins and plums and figs and caramel. That's really where this is kind of binding to. I'm not really getting a ton more interplay, maybe just a little bit of this kind of apricot nature. There's nothing else really in here popping out. Like sometimes you get ribbons of different stone fruit, you get kind of some baked good-like qualities. This is really more just like a medley of different kind of fruit kind of vibes that pop in and out, mixed with this really nicely caramelized malt bill. Just the combination of flavors works really well. It tastes like a barley wine should, and this one's not fussy. It's just, it is what it is. It's a barley wine. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel. It's just really well done. If maybe a bit subdued compared to some others that I've had. But yeah, very, very nice barley wine indeed. I absolutely love them. And get so many of these that are barrel-aged these days, and don't get me wrong, I absolutely love them. But when we take a back-to-basics approach, just make the base beer style, let the combination of ingredients speak and do their thing without any interruption from other outside influences, it really does show a lot about the core beer, what the brewers did to get there, and it kind of highlights certainly strengths and weaknesses if you're wanting to go down that path. I think it just really gives you a much greater sense of the layering and how it came from point A to point B. Okay, so the finish on this beer. Barley wines can kind of be all over the board. Typically, the barrel-aged ones will be very, very long. Some of the standard versions, no barrels, will also be quite long just due to pungency of ingredients. But one thing is true about most barley wines, I say most because not all, is that in general, they are not super bitter beer styles. They're not very hop dominant. So even though they generally have a very big intensity of flavor, without these bitters kind of driving it out, even though they tend to kind of stick around the palate, the finish doesn't go anywhere as long as compared to even say like most imperial stouts would do. It just isn't part of the style. So this one overall for the finish, I would say, is average. It's not short, it's not long, it's just middle of the road. But everything that I've gotten here, very well put together package for a barley wine. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, count my scores. When we come back, we'll get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Fairstate Brewing Cooperative's Life Ain't Fair, a barley wine clocking in at 14.8% ABV. Fairstate is based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So starting with the aroma on this one. The aroma on this was typical barley wine. It was quite pronounced, well above average for the style. This one had a lot of kind of grape and kind of raisin and definitely strong caramel notes, a little bit of fig, slight apricot on the nose as well. It didn't have every single kind of undercurrent that you often get in barley wine, but it had the majority and it was very nice in terms of presence. Aroma does get a 9 out of 10. For the taste on this overall I thought was absolutely fantastic. The actual flavor profile itself, delicious. Very much classic barley wine. It had all of the big hallmarks. It maybe didn't have every little variant that any single barley wine can potentially have, and most barley wines don't. I've only ever had one or two that have kind of the everything but the kitchen sink kind of thrown at them in terms of flavor profiles or aroma profiles. But this was very much classic core. The only thing that I was thinking as I was drinking this was the intensity for a nearly 15% ABV barley wine was dialed back, certainly for the style. What I tasted was absolutely fantastic, but it lacked a little pungency. Once I got my second sip, because this was quite a thick stick around the palate, it really improved. But I would have liked a little more oomph up front to let the intensity of these flavors come through and have it really have the presence of a nearly 15% ABV beer. As it were, I loved it though. I only docked 1 point. The taste does get a 9 out of 10. For the body on this was another category that, you know, they're all over the board with barley ones, but this one, nearly 15%, it really just felt kind of border of medium heavy. It wasn't even a robust heavy, which is typical for the style and that ABV range. Overall, I thought it was high end of average. Body gets a 6 out of 10. For the mouthfeel on the other hand was everything I expected it to be. A boatload of resistance. You knew when you were moving around the palate that this was a 15% ABV barley wine. It had a lot of thickness, a lot of resistance. This one got really creamy when you agitated. Mouthfeel was top tier, 10 out of 10. For the finish was another category here, and we talk about this a fair bit. Look, there's a lot of barley wines that add adjuncts and different flavors and barrel age and this and that and the other. This was a classic barley wine formula, just a barley wine done true to style. And in the grand scheme of things, this one was really just average in terms of length. Without that barrel aging and without a massive pungency of flavor or some driving bitter or something that's going to really stick on the palate and drive it out, it's really just going to be average, and that's what this was. No knock to it. It was perfectly average for the style and as expected. The finish gets a 5 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one did okay. Barley wines tend to be quite effervescent. That was the case with this one. Very effervescent, and the carbonation that was coming up out of this one was kind of those bigger bubbles, which tends to make the head collapse pretty quickly after they form. That happened here. It was really just average for the style. Head and retention, it's a 5 out of 10. For the appearance, this was that textbook caramel color. Appearance gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance on this was absolutely fantastic. The malt bill, what specific blend of malts that they used, the yeast strain, the hops that they used, everything about this was exactly right for brewing a classic barley wine. I wouldn't have tweaked it at all. The balance does get a perfect 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I love barley wine. It's my favorite beer style. I've had many barley wines over the years, probably far more than the average beer drinker. But this one for me, I really enjoyed subjectively, but I would have liked just a little more oomph from this beer personally. It tasted great. It smelled great. It had all the classic recipe there, but it was kind of hovering in this just kind of well done of an average representation of this style. It lacked that certain je ne sais quoi. But as it were, I still really enjoyed it and think that they executed it beautifully. I did think it was above average. Feeling in the intangible gets an 8 out of 10. Finally is an example of the style. So, Barley wines are not super common, but this was a really great representation of a classic, no nonsense, no frills, no tricks, no gimmicks, barley wine. That being said, there were a few areas where this one missed the mark just a little bit for me. The intensity of the flavor profile was one. The body, I would have liked a little more oomph on a nearly 15% ABV beer, and certainly the finish in the head and retention. Those don't really impact what the beer style is about, what the beer drinking experience is about, but it's pretty big points that it lost, so I did have to dock some here. I did really enjoy the beer, and I thought it was a great example of a classic barley wine. Well above average. Example of the style gets an 8 out of 10, which brings the total score on Fairstate Brewing Cooperative's Life Ain't Fair to an 80 out of 100. So, well above average. Look, I know this is another one of those, oh, it's only an 80. Look, if you like a classic barley wine, no punches pulled, no tricks, just done well, executed well, this is definitely one for you. My fellow barley wine fans, you know, if you're into barley wine like I am, then you know what I'm talking about every time I wax poetic about a barley wine. This is just a classic, well-done example of a barley wine. If you want to get back to basics, the simplicity of a barley wine, this is a wonderful example, and I would recommend it to any barley wine fan. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit that bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep your beer, keep your craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.